Before the world was mapped, before borders were drawn and stories rewritten, there was a land ancient and vast, older than the pyramids, richer than the rivers that fed it, wiser than the conquerors who tried to claim it. Tonight, we return to that land, not as tourists, but as dreamers. Africa, a cradle for life, a forge of empires, a continent that sang loudly and long before history found its pen. Tonight, let the weight of the day fall from your shoulders and let the world grow quiet. And let your spirit travel with me, not through fantasy, but through memory. We'll drift across golden deserts. Caravans once shimmered like mirages in the heat. Sail down rivers older than the Nile. Into forests thick with wisdom and war drums. We'll walk beneath the shadow of queens and follow in the footstep of kings. And we'll listen. And we'll learn from the voices that still echo beneath the soil. Not the Africa you were shown in textbooks, but the Africa that remembers itself. We begin in the West, where the Mali Empire rose like a golden sun, and from its heart came a man so wealthy, so generous, that the world itself tilted. Mansa Musa, the Lion of Mali. The pilgrim who scattered gold across deserts like raindrops, humbling kingdoms, bankrupting cities, and placing Timbuktu on the map of eternity. But wealth was only one part of his story. He built libraries, schools, mosques. He dreamed of knowledge, not just riches. And the sands of the Sahara still carry his name. We float now further south. The air thickens, the trees grow taller, and the chains of colonial ambition begin to tighten. But not without resistance. From the dense green of the kingdom of Ndongo rises a warrior queen, a diplomat, a general, a tactician with fire in her veins. Queen Nzinga, who met the Portuguese on her own terms, once refusing to sit lower than them, so she commanded a servant to become her living throne. She fought for freedom, negotiated for peace, and when denied dignity, she carved her own. She did not bow, she made others rise, and across the ocean, winds of time, another woman lifts her voice. Ya Asantewa, mother, warrior, last ember of resistance against the British and the Ashanti Kingdom. When the men faltered, she stood. When the sacred golden stool, symbol of unity, was threatened, she rose with fire in her heart and called her people to battle. They say the forest still remembers her footsteps, and the drum still beat with her courage. These are not fairy tales. These are not myths. These are echoes of real lives, real resistance, real majesty. But this journey has only begun. We'll hear the footsteps of Sundiata Keita, the lion-born founder of Mali. We'll witness the craft and complexity of Great Zimbabwe, a city of stone and mystery. We'll meet the scholar kings of Songhai, the astronomers of Timbuktu, and the builders of Benin. And when the wars grow quiet, when the kingdoms fall asleep, we'll sit beside the fire and listen to stories older than kings. Folk tales of clever hares, wise tortoises, and trickster spirits. Stories carried on tongues across villages through centuries. You don't need to remember everything. You're allowed to drift, to dream, to float through time. Close your eyes now. Let the night cradle you like the Niger cradles the moon. Let your breath slow like the footsteps of a caravan moving across eternity. You are not alone. You are with ancestors. You are among greatness. And the stories are just beginning. We begin in the golden heart of West Africa. The year is 1324, and a man rises with the sun. He wears no crown that glitters, and yet the world will never forget him. And yet the world will never forget him. Mansa Musa, Emperor of Mali, keeper of rivers and salt, of scholars and gold, a man born to rule, but destined to dazzle the world. His name would stretch beyond his kingdom, through the dunes of the Sahara, across the Red Sea, to the palaces of Cairo, and even the distant courts of Europe. But not through war, through generosity, through a journey that would become legend. This is the story of the richest man to ever walk the earth, but also of a dreamer who saw power not as conquest, but as legacy. He begins his pilgrimage with a vision to walk the sacred lands of Mecca, not in secret, but in splendor. He wants thousands to follow, servants, soldiers, scholars, and of course, musicians. A golden river winding across the dunes is the vision for his caravan. Over 60,000 people, they say, each clothed in the finest cloth, with camels that carried not grain or water, but gold, pure gold, not coins, but bars, dust, slabs stacked like stories, to be scattered like blessings in every city he passed. He gave to the poor, to the merchants, to the mosques, to the scholars. In Cairo, he gave so much that gold lost its value. Inflation rippled through the region like a stone dropped in still water, echoing for years. Imagine that. A gift so grand, the entire economy of kingdoms wavered beneath it. But Mansa Musa's treasure was not just metal. He carried with him architects, poets, and thinkers. He spoke with mystics and rulers. He prayed at dawn with those he met, and by night he sketched cities in his mind. Cities built not only of stone, but of books. For it was on this journey, as the sand slipped through his fingers, that a deeper vision took root. When he returned to Mali, he brought more than riches. He brought blueprints. He summoned architects from Andalusia. He commissioned libraries in Timbuktu, a city that would become a lighthouse of learning, drawing scholars from across Africa and beyond. He built mosques, elegant and lasting. He supported schools where children would study not only religion, but mathematics, astronomy, medicine, law. Mali became more than a kingdom. It became a university of empire, a place where wisdom was wealth. And yet, despite his riches, despite the gold that paved his path, Mansa Musa moved with humility. He did not name cities after himself. He did not carve his face into stone. Instead, he carved knowledge into the future. And so tonight, we walk that golden path with him. We pass beneath ancient stars. We listen to the soft pad of camel feet on sand. We feel the hush of the desert wind, the weight of gold in our hands, and the lighter weight of giving it away. As we drift, we remember, not all kings take. Some kings give, and in giving, they become eternal. Queen Nzinga, she who would not kneel. The forest breathes here, heavy with mist, alive with memory. Through the trees, where light filters like whispers, a story waits. It begins not with a battle, but with a woman, a queen, Nzinga. Born to the royal house of Ndongo in what we now call Angola. She was not raised to sit still or to speak softly. She was raised among warriors, among strategy, among survival. Her father taught her to speak the language of diplomacy, but also how to ride, how to command, how to sense betrayal before the blade was drawn. When her brother ruled, she stood just behind the throne, her mind sharper than the spears that guarded it. But power rarely comes without shadows, and the Portuguese brought many. They came with crosses and with cannons, with sweet words and with shackles, with promises of trade and the reality of chains. When they demanded a meeting, Nzinga arrived cloaked in red, her posture calm, her gaze unblinking. They offered her no seat, a quiet insult, one meant to diminish her. But Nzinga did not lower herself. She signaled to a servant who knelt on his hands and knees eagerly, and with serene grace, Nzinga sat upon his back. Eye to eye was she with her rival, not above cruelty, but never beneath it. That moment became legend, not for what she said, but for what she didn't have to say. I belong here, and I will not be made small. When her brother passed, possibly by Nzinga's own hand, she stepped forward, not as a caretaker or regent, but as a full queen. And she ruled with iron will and fluid grace. When the Portuguese pushed, she pushed back. And when they broke treaties, she formed new alliances. She fled when she had to, but only to gather her strength. In the mountains of West Africa, she built a new kingdom, a home for runaways, rebels, and the enslaved. A kingdom of resistance. They say that as she went into battle, she dressed as a man and led armies through swamps in silence. She negotiated by day and plotted the freedom of her people by firelight. She knew when to convert to the foreign religions and when to cast off masks. Every faith she wore like armor. And yet, beneath all the strategy was a simple truth. She would not sell her people. She would not let them be stolen. She outlived kings, outlasted generals, outwitted empires. And by the time she laid down her sword, she had ruled for 4 decades, her kingdom scarred, but still standing. She died an old woman, not in chains, not in exile, but in power. Tonight, as you drift further into rest, know that there was once a queen who bent for no throne, who bowed to no empire, who sat when no seat was given, and turned her spine into a throne. Her name was Nzinga, and the trees still speak of her. Before the scholars of Timbuktu dipped their quills in ink, before caravans carried gold across oceans of sand, before kings knelt to the might of Mali, there was silence A time of scattered tribes, whispered prophecies, and a people waiting for someone who could hold the pieces together. But that someone did not arrive on a throne. He did not come cloaked in glory. He did not ride a horse or bear a crown. He was born quietly in a small village to a mother who was mocked, to a boy who could not walk. And his name was Sundiata. They say he was soft and silent, a boy whose legs had no strength, whose body dragged behind him like a forgotten shadow. While other children ran through fields and climbed trees, Sundiata crawled through the dust, his hands raw, his pride silent. His mother, Sogalan, believed in him, a woman of quiet strength and fierce love. But others, they whispered, "He will never stand. He is cursed. A lion born without legs." But some knew better. For long before strength comes, there is stillness. And before fire roars, it smolders. One day, as the sun dipped below the trees, Sundiata rose. There he grasped an iron rod, his fingers trembling like leaves before rain. The wind paused. The sky waited. And he pulled himself upward, slowly, painfully, until he stood, his shadow long across the ground. One step, then another. The child who could not walk now moved like destiny. The earth did not roar, but it remembered, for in that moment, a lion had found its legs. But the world was not yet at peace. Far to the north, a dark force held the land in fear. Sumaro Kante, a king of power and shadows, ruled with cruelty and magic. He wore skulls as ornaments and cast spells with a whisper. He could not be touched by iron. He could not be reasoned with. Many had tried. All had failed. But Sundiata was not like the others. He did not seek glory. He sought freedom. With allies gathered from many lands, Sundiata raised an army. He called on old enemies, built trust where there had once been war, and shaped unity from broken pieces. At the Battle of Karina, his army faced the impossible. Sumaro stood cloaked in terror, his magic thick like smoke, his voice a blade, his body immune to iron. But Sundiata carried not only steel, he carried wisdom. A single arrow, tipped with the spur of a white rooster, a symbol of mourning, truth, and sacrifice, cut through the dark, and with it, the tyrant's power cracked. Sumuru vanished into legend, and Sundiata rose into history. With the tyrant gone, Sundiata was crowned Mansa, king. But he did not become a tyrant in turn. He did not build palaces for vanity. He did not carve statues of himself. Instead, he built roads. He repaired farms. He invited voices from every village to shape the laws of his land. He ruled not with fear, but with listening. He gathered the griots, those who carried stories in their bones, and made sure Mali remembered its own soul. What he built one day would inspire Mansa Musa and echo across generations. He built not just an empire, but a rhythm, a heartbeat that pulsed through the land. Sundiata's story is told still, sung by griots under starlight, passed from voice to voice like sacred breath. Not because he was perfect, but because he began low and rose high, because he often fell, but never stayed down, because he walked when no one believed he could. Tonight, as you lie still, know that the lion is not born roaring. He is born in silence. He grows in pain. He learns to rise. When he walks forever. Sundiata Kita, the boy who crawled, the king who stood. Queen Amina, the sword of truth. The north holds its own kind of silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of stone. Weathered, watching, remembering. Here beyond the savannas and into the plains of what we now call Nigeria, the land once rang with iron hooves and golden banners. At the center of it all, a woman carved from flame and steel. Her name was Amina, daughter of Zazazo, queen of war, and ruler of destiny. Born into royal blood, Amina was not born into shadow. She was born into fire, the granddaughter of a ruler, the daughter of a queen. Her people were the Hausa, a proud and ancient lineage, skilled in trade, architecture, and war. From a young age, Amina stood apart. While others played in courtyards, she trained with guards. While others memorized prayers, she studied maps. Her fingers touched not just silk, but steel. She listened to generals. She followed caravans. She memorized terrain like poetry. And when her mother, Queen Bakwa, passed, the throne waited. But Amina was not yet ready to sit. She stepped away, not to escape power, but to earn it. For 3 decades, Amina rode into battle. not behind her soldiers, but besides them, as one of them. She wore armor. She swung a sword taller than some men. Her horse became legend. Her eyes, unreadable. They say her voice was calm in the chaos, that she gave commands like verses, that she knew when to charge and when to wait like the moon before rising. Her campaigns swept across the Sahel, from Kano to Katsina, from Nupe to Rafa. Every kingdom that stood in her path felt the tremor of hooves and the sound of her name. But Amina's rule was not one of only conquest. She was a builder, a planner, above all, a protector. She ordered the construction of high defensive walls around the cities she conquered. Walls of clay and stone, fortified not just against enemies, but against time itself. Many of these walls still stand today. They are called Ganuwar Amina, the walls of Amina. They whisper to the wind, and they hold her memory in every crack. Legends tell of lovers, men who dared court the warrior queen. But always they vanish. Some say she loved once, but could never be claimed. Others say she belonged only to her people, and that her heart was walled off, like the cities she built. Perhaps that is the cost of greatness, to touch so many lives, but walk alone. But no one truly knows. Amina never wrote her secrets. She let the rain. But no one truly knows. Amina never wrote her secrets. She let the land remember for her. Queen of the sword and the sun, she ruled for over 34 years. She expanded the Zhao farther than any ruler before or after. She opened trade routes, strengthened borders, and left her name carved into geography. She is not just remembered in history, but in song. Among the Hausa, she is a legend. Among her people, a mother of strength. Among dreamers, a queen who galloped across the stars. And tonight, as you breathe slower and the rhythm of sleep settles in, imagine her. Imagine her riding beneath a desert moon, her blade resting at her side, her cloak trailing behind like smoke. She does not speak. She only watches. She is not gone. She has become the wind. Queen Amina of Sazao, of the north, of the sky. Ya Asantewa, the woman who would not yield. Not every queen is born in a palace, and not every warrior holds a sword, and not every revolution begins with a shout. Some begin with silence, with serene grief, with courage, and with a woman who dares to speak when others will not. Her name was Ya Asantewa, a mother, a farmer, and above all, a leader. And the fire at the heart of the last great stand against the British colonizers in the Ashanti lands of what is now Ghana. She lived not in a time of glory, but in a time of loss. The Ashanti Empire had once stood strong, an empire of gold, of order, of spiritual unity. But by the late 1800s, the empire was being pulled apart by foreign hands. The British had come not just for trade, but for control. They had already exiled the king. Ashanti chiefs were in disarray. The sacred lands trembled. And then they made a demand no one could ignore. They wanted the golden stool. A simple object maybe, it might seem to outsiders at least, but to the Ashanti, the stool was no throne of power. It was the soul of the people, the seat of ancestors. It was untouchable, and to ask for it was to ask for too much. The chiefs gathered. The room was thick with fear. What could they do? Their warriors were scattered. Their king was far away. The British forces were strong and unrelenting. The men lowered their eyes. The fire in the room dimmed until a voice rose, not loud, not filled with anger, but steady, strong, clear. It was Ya Asantewa, the Queen Mother of Ejisu, a woman respected, but never expected to lead, until now. She stood, eyes lit like coals. Her voice carried centuries behind it. Is it true that the bravery of the Ashanti is no more? If you, the men of Ashanti, will not fight, then we, the women, will. A pause. Silence grips the room. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight. We will stand. We will defend the golden stool. And just like that, the silence shattered. What had been shame became spirit, and what had been fear became fire. Ya Asantewa did not simply inspire, she led. She raised an army. She organized supplies. She commanded strategy. Her warriors built fortresses of mud and courage in the forests. They ambushed British columns. They surrounded their forts. For months, the Ashanti resisted. Against rifles, against discipline, against odds no one would have accepted. But Ya did not lead with blind hope. She led because no one else would. She knew the cost. She knew the pain. But also, she knew that to lose the golden stool was to lose the soul of a people forever. Eventually, their rebellion was crushed. The British, with reinforcements and artillery, broke through the resistance. Yas and Tewa was captured, exiled to the Seychelles, far from her people, far from the stool she had sworn to protect. She never returned to her homeland, but her story never left. Today, her name is spoken in markets and classrooms, sung in lullabies and marches. She is more than a symbol, she is a standard. Not because she won, but because she resisted. She stood up. Not because she carried a sword, but because she carried the people's spirit when others dropped it. And as you close your eyes tonight, let your heart settle beside hers. Imagine her in the quiet forest, cloaked wrapped tight, listening to the drums in the distance, ready to rise again. A King Arthur figure. Yas and Tewa, the woman who would not kneel. The last voice of a falling empire. The first whisper of a rising one. She still walks, and the land still remembers. Now that the queens and kings have slept, let us return to the fire, where stories live not in books, but in breath. These are not the tales of empires, but of animals, of clever tricksters, gentle giants, and wise old trees. Stories told to children as the moon rose, and to elders who knew the outcome, but still smiled each time. Let the world soften. Let the wind hush, and listen, and learn. Once upon a time, in a land of tall grass and warm sun, there lived a lion who ruled over all the animals. He was not cruel, yet he was proud. He was a lion after all. And he was very, very hungry. Each day, the animals brought him food, hoping to keep him full and asleep. One day, it was the hare's turn. Alas, the hare was not afraid. He may be small, yes, but also clever. He approached the lion with a bow. "I would have come sooner," said the hare, "but another lion stopped me on the way." The great lion's ears perked. Another lion in my land? The hare nodded gravely. He was huge and fierce and claimed to be king. The lion roared, "Take me to him." So the hare led him to a still pond beneath a tree. "There he is," said the hare. The lion looked, and in the water, his own reflection stared back at him. He roared, and the reflection roared back. He leapt into the water, and was soaked, from head to tail. The hare, long gone. And from that day on, the lion thought twice before messing with small creatures. Sometimes the sharpest claws come in the smallest pause. In a quiet forest, near a village of song and shadow, there lived a turtle who loved the sky. He would lie on his back and watch the birds, longing to join them. The other animals laughed. "You are too heavy. Your shell is too thick." But the turtle didn't stop dreaming. One day, the birds invited all the animals to a feast in the sky. Each bird would carry a guest. The turtle was overjoyed. He asked the birds to give him feathers, just enough to make wings. And so they did. The turtle fashioned a clumsy set of wings, and with the help of the wind, he rose. Up, up, into the clouds. He marveled at the trees below, the rivers like silver threads, the earth like a memory. At the feast, he ate too much, bragged too much too, and when it was time to go home, his pride weighed heavier than his shell. He tried to glide down, but his wings were weak, his balance off. He tumbled from the sky and landed with a crack. His shell shattered, but the wise tortoise did not die. He healed, and his shell grew back in pieces. Cracked, but whole, stronger for the fall. And to this day, turtles wear the marks of that journey, etched across their backs like stories in stone. That story was brought to us by the West African Yoruba people. The hummingbird and the fire, an East African Kikuyu proverb. One night, lightning struck the forest, and the flames soared across the land and sky. The animals ran. The elephants, the leopards, the monkeys, they fled in fear, the smoke chasing them like a specter in the night. But one small bird did not run. A small hummingbird, tiny, fast, and bright. She flew to the river, filled her beak with water, and dropped it on the fire. And dropped it on the fire. Again, and again, and again, and again. The other animals watched. "What are you doing?" they asked in hurried and hushed tones. "You can't put out that fire." The hummingbird paused. "Maybe not, but I'm doing what I can." And then she flew back to the river, over and over, not to win, but to try. And sometimes, trying is enough. The fire is low now. The stars have turned, and the stories, they're still here, resting with you, curled around your dreams like gentle animals. For in every land and every time, someone is telling stories. to hold the night still just a little longer. So sleep easy and sleep proud. You've walked through empires, stood with queens, and sat by the fire with creatures of wisdom. Africa remembers, and now, so do you.